But to me, max in my life would be ease, reconciling what I need to do to pay the bills with my passion and my purpose. My purpose is to help save life in the ocean and on the planet. My passion is exploring nature and producing films and conducting research and inspiring other people to do the right thing. And I am lucky that I have been able to combine the two, my passion and my purpose, into my job. Because as you said, I was able to create my job when I came to National Geographic and proposed to do this Pristine Seas project. So that's it to me, to be able to merge these three things and make sure that you have just one integrated, well-balanced life.
Welcome back to the Max Out Show, where today I'm joined by Dr. Enric Sala, a National Geographic explorer and founder of Pristine Seas, a project that combines exploration, research, and media to inspire leaders around the world to protect the oceans. Enric helped create over 20 of the largest marine reserves on the planet, covering an area half the size of Canada. So Enric, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Max.
I'm super excited to have you. And so before we start talking about the importance of our ecosystem and the economic and health benefits we get from preserving them, I want to quickly dive into your story, because it seems like from a very early age, you've developed this lifelong love affair with the oceans. So can you share with us a little bit about why you started in this field and what continues to fascinate you about the water?
I was a little boy growing up in Catalonia, in Spain, in the early 70s, watching the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau. And that was it. I was hooked to ocean exploration since I was a little kid, since I can remember. That's all I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to do a diver in Cousteau's boat. Wow. And I was born a little late for that, but I studied marine biology. I became a scientist, a professor. And what drives me now, I still have this childhood dream on the back of my mind, because I was born too late to be a diver on the Calypso, but I'm doing it myself now with my own team.
Yeah, you created this yourself, right? Which is absolutely amazing. And so you talked before about sort of writing the obituary of the oceans, right? While you're you're a college professor, you saw the oceans just constantly degrading. So for our listeners, can you give us some perspective of how fast the oceans have been polluted and destroyed over the last couple of decades?
Yeah, I'll try to be short because it's pretty depressive.
Yeah.
We have killed 90% of the large fish in the ocean in the last 100 years alone. These are the sharks, groupers, tuna, cod, the big fish. We have been taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce. So about 80% of the fish stocks around the world are being overfished, fished faster than they can replenish themselves. If we continue this way, studies suggest that by 2050, most commercial fisheries around the world will have collapsed.
Wow.
So the situation of extraction of marine life is pretty bad. Then we have global warming, which is making the ocean warmer and more acidic, killing corals and other animals all around the world, and melting the ice caps with also disastrous consequences for the weather. And finally, we have the pollution. Some pollution we cannot see, like all the mercury that our coal power plants burn, which ends up in the ocean, accumulated in marine life that people will end up eating, but also the plastics, which is such a huge problem now. And you all have seen all these photos of beautiful ocean places full of ocean trash. And even on our own expeditions with National Geographic, Pristine Seas, or even in the wildest places, even in the most remote places in the ocean, we have collected water samples and we have found microplastics in them.
Wow.
So these are the three big things. We're taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce. We are making the ocean warmer and more acidic, and we are polluting the ocean. We're throwing into the ocean everything that we don't want.
Yeah, such a terrible destruction. So one thing that is abundantly clear from your work is that like everything on this planet is connected and interdependent, right? So even if people live far away from the oceans and they don't care about fish, at the end of the day, it's still going to affect them, right? So can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of the oceans, not just for, that beauty and everything, but also the economic and health benefits that we get from them?
Yeah, everything, as you said, Max, is interconnected. And this is why I decided to write my new book, which has just been published, The Nature of Nature, to make sure that everybody understands how we are all connected to all other creatures on the planet, not just among ourselves humans. And I think that the COVID pandemic, I like to use it as an example of how everything is connected, because before, people, at least in the United States, said, oh, well, climate change is something that will happen to somebody in the future, not destruction of nature. I live in a city. I don't see any problem. I have food in the supermarket, so it's not affecting me. But this pandemic is affecting everybody. Everybody has been on lockdown one way or another. So many millions of people have lost their jobs. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. And why? Because one virus spilled over from a wild animal to a person in China, creating a local outbreak. And because of our globalized lifestyle, it spread like wildfire across the world, creating this pandemic. So it was wildlife trade in one country that created a pandemic that has stopped the global economy. Today is COVID, but yesterday was SARS, Ebola, HIV, Zika, Marburg, and other infectious diseases. So this is one very strong proof that everything is connected, even in the ocean, because you have coal power plants in the United States or China or in some places in Europe, putting mercury in the atmosphere, which ends up in the ocean, which ends up being absorbed by little organisms, which are going to be eaten by larger organisms and small fish, and then tuna, for example. And the larger the fish, the more pollutants, the more toxins they accumulate in their bodies. So you can be in Switzerland or you can be in Ohio eating a fillet of tuna, including the mercury in it. Wow. That was caused by the coal power plants that also are a big contributor to climate change. So there you go. This is just two examples of how everything is connected.
Yeah, and another thing that you talked about in your book, and I found that personally fascinating because I used to live in Florida and Fort Myers, where we had all these hurricanes, right? It's like when you talk about the mangroves and how they are actually able to protect us from many of these, things coming out of the ocean and oftentimes killing people and destroying houses and economies, right?
Yeah, the mangroves are this wonderful ecosystem that everybody should go to a mangrove forest one day, because it's the only tree that grows on seawater, right? You have this forest lining the border between the land and the sea, and they provide this structure. They are able to diminish the destructive power of waves, and we have seen everywhere where there's been a hurricane or even the tsunami in Southeast Asia, the places that had intact mangrove forests have dealt better because the forests were able to absorb much of the destructive power of the waves. While in areas where the mangroves have been cut for coastal development or for building shrimp farms, that was a total destruction. So this is another example of an ecosystem that might not seem too much to most people and might be seen like an annoyance to coastal developers. It has an enormous insurance value that we have taken for granted.
Yeah, for sure. And so to piggyback off of what you said before, I think there is this natural human tendency to downplay things that, or eventual risks that are far removed from us, right? So like when people don't see yet or don't feel the consequences yet, like you said, right? When you're eating that tuna here, you don't actually feel the consequences yet of all of these ecosystems collapsing, but we know that it's going to happen further down the line, right? So do you think that with this whole COVID pandemic and the consequences of destroying nature and all of that becoming more real, more vivid in people's minds, do you think there's going to be like some change in people's hearts and minds?
Well, if it doesn't happen now, when is it going to happen? Because
Yes.
I live in Washington D.C. and today the sky is hazy because of the fires on the other side of the country.
Wow.
Right? You've seen these apocalyptic wildfires, which are caused by climate change and by human activities. But also we have two hurricanes forming at the same time in the Caribbean. And we have, I just saw this news story about thousands of birds basically falling from the sky in the United States.
Whoa.
Emaciated, because probably climate change, a combination of climate change that has reduced their food, the insect populations, plus all the pesticides and all the horrible agricultural practices that also destroy the habitat and kill the insect populations, plus the fires that probably made all these populations of birds that are migrating from Canada into Central America have to choose different routes because the atmosphere on the West Coast is so horrible right now. So there you go. All these poor birds, tens of thousands of them are basically falling from the sky, and people are finding them in huge quantities. It is definitely apocalyptic. So, if we don't realize now that our broken relationship with nature is biting back at us, when? So I really hope that this pandemic is, and what's happening now with the wildfires and global warming, is going to be the wake-up call that the world needs, so we can build back better instead of just continue digging ourselves deeper and deeper.
Yes, for sure. Such an important point. I think one thing that's also going to help in that is like you've actually done research that shows that investing in these ecosystems and saving them actually creates a return on investment, right? So can you talk to us a little bit also about the financial impacts that we can positively gain and when we actually save the ecosystems?
Yes. Many people, including some leaders, ask the question, we cannot afford to invest in nature because we don't have the resources. Well, now the world will have to spend trillions of dollars to address the cost of this pandemic, right? How much would it cost to prevent or reduce the risks of the next pandemic? Well, we released an economic report this year that estimated that to protect 30% of the planet by 2030, which is the minimum that science is telling us we should do, would cost about $140 billion per year. 140 billion might seem like a lot, but think about this. It is less than what the world spends today on video games. Right? So
put things into perspective.
Exactly. So, and also nature, for every dollar that we invest in protected areas, for example, nature would give us $5 in return through tourism or better fisheries around marine protected areas, or other benefits like the value of the coastal protection afforded by the mangroves, for example. And these mangroves also are a great place, a nursery for fish that then are going to be caught by commercial fishermen, etc. So the economic returns of protected nature, of intact nature, are much greater than what we get if we destroy it. Because if we think of a forest, if you cut the forest and you sell the timber, that's it. That's all the value. That's all the value you get from this forest. But if you don't cut it, that forest is producing oxygen, is producing rain, which helps to water crops nearby. It is the habitat for many species of birds and insects that then will go and pollinate our crops. It also absorbs much of the rainwater and affords some protection from floods. It also helps to create soil, which in turn absorbs much of our carbon pollution from the atmosphere, etc., etc., etc. So you have an intact ecosystem that provides all these benefits that we can enjoy. You destroy it, and all these benefits are gone. The problem is that we don't account for all these benefits and the cost of destroying the ecosystems on our balance sheets, right? But if we do that, if we internalize the cost of our activities, then there will be a much more powerful incentive to protect nature, which is our life support system. So what would be wrong with that?
Yeah, it definitely seems like humanity has been playing this really short-sighted game, right? Of making quick profits, of destroying the environment to make more money, but over a long run, as you're saying, really the wisest thing, even financially, would actually be to save the environment and protect it, right? And so you've done you talked about really interestingly about how when you create these nature preserves, right, actually biodiversity returns really quickly, right? So in these spots where it's essentially empty now, right, all the fish are gone, and then you let it go for a while, biodiversity comes back really quickly, doesn't it?
It comes back spectacularly. We have seen it. I have seen it in so many places around the world, places that were degraded, and we protected from fishing and other damaging activities, and the fish come back spectacularly. You can see a big difference in as little as 3 years. And on average, the abundance of fish in these protected areas is 600% larger than outside.
Wow.
600% return on investment. Imagine that's spectacular.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. So I'm super curious, is there a certain time when it's going to be too late? Like, is there a certain, like year or date, whatever, at which point these changes become irreversible?
It's already too late for some things, but the good news is that it's not too late for others. For example, because of the warming of the atmosphere and the ocean, the Arctic Ocean is going to be free of sea ice during the summer months before 2040.
Wow.
Even if we went completely carbon neutral today, there is such inertia that it would take a while for the planet to cool down again. So that would not prevent the Arctic sea ice to melt. And the Arctic sea ice is a reflector, right? It reflects sun rays. But if you remove that white cover, what you have is dark seawater, which absorbs those the heat from the sunlight, which in turn makes the ocean warmer, which in turn melts more ice, and so on and so forth. So that's something that's going to happen no matter what. If we go carbon neutral, we will see the return of the summer sea ice in this century, right? If we don't, it's gone forever. But there are species of marine animals like the monk seal of the Caribbean. The Caribbean used to have a seal living in there, a tropical seal, but the last individual was seen in 1952. We killed them to death, so it's impossible for the Caribbean monk seal to come back. But most other species are still there, and we have seen the recovery of species from small to large in these marine reserves, including the big animals. There is a place in Baja California in Mexico that I loved called Cabo Pulmo. In the mid-90s, the local fishermen were so upset with not having enough fish to catch that they asked the Mexican government to create a no-take marine park, a national park. They did it, and we came back 10 years after protection, and oh my God, it was extraordinary. The big fish, they were there, all of them, the big groupers, the big snappers, manta rays, and including the return of the sharks. Before, in 10 years, I had seen maybe a dozen of sharks in 10 years of diving in the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. 12 sharks. Well, you can see 12 sharks in a single dive today in that place in Cabo Pulmo. So the ocean has this extraordinary ability to bounce back. We just need to give it some space.
Yeah, for sure. So interesting. So I'm super curious. What has been your favorite expedition so far? I know you've done a lot around the world.
Well, this is like asking a parent which one of your kids you love. Yeah, there's been some fantastic places, but there is a very special one. It was the first one that we did with Pristine Seas in 2009 to a place called Millennium Atoll. It's an inhabited coral atoll in the South Pacific that belongs to the Republic of Kiribati. And nobody lives there. Nobody ever goes there. So we did an expedition. We arrived we jump in the water, and as soon as my bubbles cleared, I was surrounded by gray reef sharks.
Wow.
Oh my God, that was the sign. I knew that this place was pristine as soon as I jumped in the water. Right, that's what you expect. If you go to Africa, you expect to see lions and leopards and cheetah. Right. Well, if you go to the ocean, nobody expects to see sharks because we think that sharks are not part of our local ecosystem, but sharks should be everywhere. Almost every ecosystem in the ocean. So seeing those sharks was a good sign. Then after a while, the sharks got bored with us and they went to do their thing. And then we were able to explore the rest of the ecosystem. 80% of the bottom was covered by live coral. The lagoon in that atoll was covered with giant clams of iridescent blues and green. And the lagoon also was a nursery for blacktip reef sharks. So we had these baby sharks about a meter long, just bumping on our legs as we were wading over the shallows in the lagoon. It was one of the most wonderful expeditions we've done in our life.
Wow, I bet. And I know you've done, filming projects all over the world. So how can people, imagine that? Like, is it just you and, your team out on the sea for weeks, or how do you guys usually do that?
Yeah, so we work in places with people, but also we go to places without people. And these remote areas are uninhabited because they are so remote and they don't have fresh water, and they are difficult to get to. And that also is a reason why they are not fished and they are still near pristine. So we charter a boat from the nearest port, and we go on expedition sometimes for up to 6 weeks. We
Wow.
spend 6 weeks camping on top of Baffin Island on the Canadian Arctic with Inuit guides, with local experts. And we were able to see belugas, the narwhal, the unicorn of the sea, bowhead whales, very fat polar bears eating lots of seals as the sea ice was breaking seasonally. We have been in places in the middle of the Pacific, like Millennium Atoll and 4 other islands that are the Southern Line Islands, and 5 of them uninhabited, barely known. And we would go from island to island not knowing what we were going to find. So we have
Wow.
our team of scientists and filmmakers and our life is to dive, survey, film, and then sleep, go back to it for 5 weeks with 1 day of rest every week, because we do so much diving that we need to make sure that we don't accumulate too much nitrogen on our
Oh, yeah.
bodies. But yeah, it was what we do now is what I wanted to do when I was that little kid. Yeah, it was like the Calypso adventure, the Cousteau's exploration around the world. Only that now we have a different purpose, because Cousteau wanted us to fall in love with the ocean, and now we want to save it.
Wow, absolutely amazing. And it really sounds like you're living that childhood dream. So that's incredible. And I know much of your work is really about inspiring world leaders and governments to change and create more marine reserves. But for our listeners, they're hearing about all of this. What can, we on an individual level do to really help this whole project?
Well, there are 2 things people can do. One is something that people can do this year in the United States and soon in other countries, which is vote.
Yes,
People
please.
have to vote. Now we've reached a point where we have 2 types of leaders who understand that what the science is telling us, and leaders who only care about the short-term profit, right? At any cost. These are the people who are like they are in the Titanic, in the casino, trying to make as much money as possible after hitting the iceberg. Right? So the environment is on the ballot, really. So people need to vote this year in the United States for the leader who share their environmental values, period. And then something that everybody can do every day, which would be good for the planet and good for themselves, is eat more plants and less meat. In the United States, people are eating too much meat. The human body cannot process so much protein anyway, and much of it is flushed out. We can get all the proteins and the nutrients we need from plants. So if we reduce our animal consumption and had a plant-based diet, we would get all the nutrients that we need. But also, we would require much less land to produce the food that we need, because livestock takes a huge amount of land and a huge amount of water. For example, in the United States, 41% of the land is dedicated to raise livestock.
Wow.
41%. It's huge. So we wouldn't need so much land if we ate mostly plants. So some of the land could be given back to nature. So nature could restore itself in these protected areas and produce many more benefits to us than just meat. And finally, livestock is one of the biggest producers of global warming because they burp a lot of methane.
Yeah.
Huge amounts of methane. So reducing the production of livestock around the world would also help to reduce the amount of CO2, carbon emissions that we expel into the atmosphere. So there you go. That's my recommendation for everybody, and that would also help the ocean because there would be less global warming and less negative impacts for ocean life.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So a really personal question here is because my sister just graduated high school, and like many people, I think in this Greta Thunberg world, she's incredibly passionate about saving our ecosystems. So what do you see as the best opportunities for especially young people that maybe just graduated high school, going into college? What do you see as sort of the best opportunities for young people to get involved here and support this cause, whether as a profession or in their free time?
Well, there are many things that people can do, right, at all levels. People can write to their political leaders, but also they can activate their community. And something that young people do very well is organizing their communities, at least before the pandemic, using social networks. But people need to get off Facebook and get on other people's faces.
Yeah.
People need to get together, and maybe if you live in a city, young people should get together and demand a plan or propose a plan to their mayor to green their city. It's been shown around the world that cities with more trees are less hot and people are healthier, and also their mental well-being is better in cities with more green than in cities where it's just concrete. And for pollution control also, trees are wonderful. So young people, if you live in a city, just get together and get educated about the benefits provided by the trees and other plants in cities, and propose to your mayor a plan or demand a plan for greening your city. That's one thing that every young person and living in an urban environment could do, for example.
Love that. So Emilia, if you're listening to this, go for it. Now, one thing we love to do on the show is celebrate failures as a stepping stone to more learning, to personal growth. So throughout your career, do you have a favorite failure?
Oh my God. I've had so many failures. That's the yes. At the start of my career, well, today failures are the areas that we haven't been able to protect, right? Yeah. And a failure is that even though with our Pristine Seas project, we have helped to protect 22 places around the world, covering this huge area, the failure, it's only 6 million square kilometers and not more. Today, less than 3% of the ocean is fully protected from damaging activities. And the science is telling us we need 30% of the ocean at least, right? So it's been our failure, our collective failure, not to be able to get more places protected. But when I was a a younger person so long ago.
Yeah.
I don't think that I, I don't want to think of failure. I want to think of no. There are so many directions you can take on your life, right? And there is the poem of the path not taken. If you take one path, you automatically say no to other paths. If you decide to be a professional musician, you automatically say no to be an academic scientist, right? If you decide to be the mayor of your city, which is going to green your city, then you immediately say no to the professional musician life. So there are many things that in retrospect would have done differently. Well, I don't know. I maybe I would have been a little bolder and I would have knocked at Jacques Cousteau's door directly. Now with hindsight, but I am actually very happy with the life that I have lived so far and the path I have taken. If I could do some things differently, maybe I would have started to dive earlier, because when I was growing up in Spain, you could dive only with scuba tanks only at age 18. That was I started diving 32 years ago, right?
Wow, yeah.
So I waited very patiently, very legally, until I was legally authorized. But if it were today, I would have started much earlier, and I would have found a way to do it. Even if I had to go to another country to do it. So that's
Just
something
finding
that
a way
I
around.
would think differently. Yeah.
Love that. Now, before I ask my final question, where can listeners connect with you and your projects online?
Yes, they can go to my website, enricsala.com. Enricsala.com. That's one. And the other one is to look at our Pristine Seas project on our website and National Geographic. It's very easy. It's pristineseas.org. Pristineseas.org. There is they can learn everything about our project. And also, I hope that people, especially young people, will buy my book, The Nature of Nature, which is available everywhere books are sold and online too. So I wanted to tell through stories, through fun stories of my own discovery journey, my own research, but also stories of other scientists, how we have figured out how 9 million species of plants and animals and 1 trillion types of microbes interact and self-assemble in these wonderful ecosystems that we call forests, wetlands, coral reefs, etc. To provide all these things that are essential to our survival, and why we need to protect this miracle of the world, of life on Earth, for our sake and not for the sake of all other creatures, and why also it makes economic sense. So I hope that that will help with the informal education of the future leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Now, to wrap it up, what does it mean for you to max out your life?
To me, it's a combination of, well, some people you hear, oh, I need to find a better balance between life and work, right? But I don't think there is a difference. No, there is life, period.
Yeah.
And of course, unless you are lucky to be financially independent, you have to work for a living. But to me, max in my life would be ease, reconciling what I need to do to pay the bills with my passion and my purpose. My purpose is to help save life in the ocean and on the planet. My passion is exploring nature and producing films and conducting research and inspiring other people to do the right thing. And I am lucky that I have been able to combine the two, my passion and my purpose, into my job. Because as you said, I was able to create my job when I came to National Geographic and proposed to do this Pristine Seas project. So that's it to me, to be able to merge these three things and make sure that you have just one integrated, well-balanced life.
Absolutely love that. Enric, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Max.
All right, guys, that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you gained some valuable ideas, tips, tools, tricks, mindsets, belief systems that will hopefully inspire you to take your life to the next level. At the end of the day, guys, it's all about application. The only thing that's going to set you apart tomorrow from where you are today is how much action you take with those ideas that you gained. And so I really want to challenge you at this point to, not just listen to this passively, to not just consume this, passively, just thinking about other things, but to really take those lessons, take those ideas that you just gained and start applying them to your lives, to really start taking action and sprinting towards those goals and those dreams that you have in your life. Now, guys, at this point, I want to ask you for a huge favor. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider heading over to iTunes and leaving a review, as that helps me really grow the show and reach more people, impact even more people around the world. If you have a family member, a friend, a loved one maybe that you think could benefit from this content, please consider, sharing it with them, forwarding to them, as that helps us really build a community of like-minded people that are all about maxing out their lives. Now, guys, with that being said, thanks so much for tuning in today. I really, really appreciate it. Stay strong and see you tomorrow.